We're going to continue our series on joy, and this week we're going to dip into the book of Ecclesiastes. Who in here has ever heard a sermon on Ecclesiastes? Raise your hand. Yeah, there's a couple, but there's not many. There's not many. And it can seem a bit daunting when you read through it. It can seem a bit confusing, even depressing. But when you take it in smaller chunks, it starts to make sense. So if you will, turn to chapter 1 and let me set the stage for us. Chapter 1, starting in verse 1, the words of the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. Who's the author here? Solomon, that's right, son of David. Solomon was the last king of a united Israel. Son of David. After Solomon dies, the kingdom splits, and we have the north, which was called, Samaria, and the south, which was called Judah. Samaria would end up being conquered by Assyria in 722 BC, and then Judah would end up finally being conquered with the destruction of Jerusalem in 586 on a third campaign by King Nebuchadnezzar. But Solomon reigned over a united country, and he reigned from 971 to 931 BC. Here, he refers to himself as the preacher, Koheleth in Hebrew. The Greek counterpart for that name is where we get the title of our book, Ecclesiastes. We find the theme of the entire book right off the bat in verse 2. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher, vanity of vanities, all is vanity. Great despair. You say, well, that's not a word we use very often anymore, is it? Vanity. Vanity means vapor or breeze. Derek Kidner, the Old Testament scholar, describes it as, quote, a wisp of vapor, a puff of wind, a mere breath, nothing you could get your hands on, the nearest thing to zero. Life is meaningless. It's nothing. Solomon is going to take to task the philosophies and the world religions and systematically show them that anything man-made does not provide the answers we desperately need. We need to understand the purpose of life, and there is nothing out there, no worldly wisdom, no philosophy, no world religion, no wisdom by any man that will get us to the purpose of life. Let's get a feel for what Solomon is getting at. Starting in verse 3, what advantage does man have in all his work, which he does under the sun? A generation goes and a generation comes, but the earth remains forever. Also the sun rises and the sun sets, and hastening to its place it rises there again, blowing towards the south, then turning towards the north. The wind continues swirling along, and on its circular courses the wind returns. Verse 7, all the rivers flow into the sea, yet the sea is not full. To the place where the rivers flow, there they flow again. Vanity of vanities, all is vanities. What is the point of life? That's what you're made to conclude. What is the point of life? He's born, he lives, he works, he builds, he dies. Nothing really changes. In a finite world, man goes from dust to dust, and there's really nothing any one of us can do about it. Be encouraged this Christmas season. Look at this imagery where the highest of all creation, man, is chewed up by the creation, by this machine, and spit out. The sun rises and sets. The wind blows to the south, then to the north, then circles back around. The rivers flow into the sea, evaporate into the atmosphere, move over land, and then flow into the sea again. Essentially, you are just part of the machine, and you can't get out of it. I'd use a good Matrix example here, but I never saw the movie, so you're just going to have to live without it. Plus, so many pastors have done that. We're part of the machine. And no one can tell us why or how to get out of the machine. No animals, no plants. Everyone is in the same boat, and it seems like sort of the height of futility. By the way, this is why your college philosophy class is so depressing. If you've ever taken college philosophy, I mean, first of all, you can almost see the caricature of the professor of a philosophy class. You know, sarcastic. I remember the one at North Texas. He spent most of his evenings at the bar drinking himself silly, and just negative, sarcastic, depressing. I think his wife had left him. You're like, dude, you should have picked another subject. This is really bad. You want to be depressed? Take a philosophy class. Even better, take a world religions class if you've taken one of those. You want to talk about feeling empty. Let me sum it up for you. Man tries to get out of the machine to a higher estate. This is world religions. He tries to do it on his own, with his own ladder, climbing as high as he can with no evidence or guarantee that he ever gets beyond the roof of his own house. That's what every other worldview is apart from Christianity. Think about every other world religion. No one comes back from the dead. No one lives long enough to prove whether it's true or not. No one can test the hypothesis. The smartest guy in the world will die just like the dumbest. The richest man will die, and his heirs will burn up all that money like a drunken sailor. Cancer gets Steve Jobs as easily as it does the homeless on the streets of Nepal, and there's nothing you can do. No matter our intellect, our wisdom, our wealth, no one gets ahead. And you can have the fanciest gold inlaid, walnut engraved coffin, and it will rot just as quickly as Grandpappy's pine box. Listen to this poem written by a former classmate of mine from the Christian school we went to, and his worldview changed. See if you can hear the depressing nature of it. He's now a nationally recognized award-winning poet. The title of the poem is "What is Man That Thou Art Mindful of Him?" by Todd Herron. Man is a weapon of mass destruction. Eliminate man and you don't eliminate the problem. As dog returns to his own filth, so man returns. A swarm, a fungus, feeding on destruction. When I was a child, I fed upon my dreams, adrift in a pool rainbowed with chemicals. A child already dead, intent on death. Think of the thousands I marshaled to destruction, 500 years having fed upon the earth. There is no better rhyme than death, with death than earth. He goes on to talk about how man simply destroys. War is the product of man which never ends. It's depressing. I went to a very famous Civil War cemetery not too long ago, and there were some amazing mausoleums. I mean, extremely expensive. You couldn't afford to build them today. And within that mausoleum was a high-ranking commander, certainly famous for his time. But yet, 20 feet away is an unmarked grave of some private. They couldn't identify his remains. And what was the difference? Because after their death, no one knew their story, their children, their fame, their bank account. They both were dead, decomposed, and now, 150 years later, I don't know either one of them. But even though man sees vanity in all this, it really doesn't stop us, I'm going to put us in this category, from doggedly pursuing it. Fame, riches, pleasure, the temptations of life. Look at verse 8. All things are wearisome. Man is not able to tell it. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. I think we know deep down that this life is but a vapor. It's short. Nothing we really do is going to make that big of a difference. And yet in our fleshly desire for fame, riches, or pleasure, we doggedly pursue it. Verse 9, that which has been is that which will be, and that which has been done is that which will be done. So there is nothing new under the sun. Is there anything of which one might say, see this? This is new. Already it has existed for ages, which were before us. So what's the point of living? I mean, you know the sermon's not going to end like this. But what's the point of living? This is why communism was such an abysmal failure. Remove God from the situation, and there is no point of living. Karl Marx explained it well. History repeats itself, first as a tragedy, then as a farce. If no one ever really gets ahead, and no one ever really arrives, and if you do arrive, you die, and no one remembers you, what's the point? You younger guys know who Terry Bradshaw is? No, not the ESPN commentator. The quarterback for who? Steelers in the 70s and 80s. I know we don't follow those northern teams, but how many Super Bowls did Terry Bradshaw win? Do you know? 4. 4 Super Bowls. An amazing accomplishment. Very rare. Do you know what he said after his 4th Super Bowl? Is this all there is? Literally, he said that. Is this all there is? But don't miss this phrase, and here's the turning point here. Under the sun. It's a glimpse. Everything is vanity of vanities, but there's this qualifying phrase, under the sun. And you start to realize that there's a glimmer of hope here. This is not an Edgar Allan Poe poem here. This is something where there is hope. Yes, he is taking us down a long path to help us realize the futility of life under the sun. So hang with me, remember that. And for the rest of our time today, we're going to look at 5 areas in which he seeks to prove his rhetorical question by pursuing things that should, according to the world, provide significance and joy. He is going to pursue this and that and the other, and he's going to say, surely that will bring me joy. Now, I know none of us have ever done that in here. I know none of us have ever been frivolous or had to have that particular thing, or knew that we would be joyful forever if we got it. But just hang with me. I know we're all mature Christians, and maybe this will help us as we talk to those other people who need it. Correct? Title of our sermon, spoiler alert here, is Joy in Our Purpose. Joy in Our Purpose. Timeless truth, life can only be enjoyed and have purpose if our highest joy and purpose is found in God. Let me say that again. Life can only be enjoyed and have purpose if our highest joy and purpose is found in God. Watch what he pursues. He's going to pursue 5 frivolous things, and then we're going to see the purpose of living. I'll repeat these, but let me go ahead and put them out there. He's going to pursue intellectualism, and then hedonism, and then materialism. He's going to pursue legacy, and then labor. And then we will see the purpose of living. Now, before we dive into these vain pursuits of joy and purpose, I want to address a serious condition among us. It's a highly contagious condition. You might even call it a potential pandemic. Don't get nervous. It's called functional agnosticism. What is an agnostic? An agnostic is someone who says, well, I don't know if there's a God. Agnosis, without knowledge. Functional agnosticism is this condition. It's usually found in wealthy suburbs among the highly educated, and it maintains a doctrinal belief statement, Christian fellowship, sometimes even regular devotional readings. But here's the key. It embraces the philosophy that knowledge, pleasure, things, status, and work might provide the purpose in life and thus bring joy. This functional agnosticism is usually a condition that Christians have. Christians who say they believe rightly and they love the Bible and they see this as the authoritative, inspired Word of God, but functionally they pursue what the world does. I want to acknowledge that all of us probably have a little bit of that functional agnosticism virus in us. And as we go through these vain pursuits, I want you to circle the one that you're most tempted to pursue so we can kill this virus, so we can kill this functional agnosticism, and we can pursue that which really brings joy and purpose. All right, pursuit of intellectualism, verse 12. I, the preacher, had been king over Israel and Jerusalem, and I set my mind to explore by wisdom, circle that, explore by wisdom, concerning all the things that have been done under heaven. It is a grievous task which God has given to the sons of men to be afflicted with. I have seen the works which have been done under the sun, and behold, all is vanity and striving after wind. What is crooked cannot be straightened, and what is lacking cannot be counted. I said to myself, behold, I have magnified and increased wisdom more than all who are over Jerusalem before me. And my mind has observed a wealth of wisdom and knowledge. And I set my mind to know wisdom and to know madness and folly. I realize that this also is striving after wind. Because in much wisdom there is much grief, and increasing knowledge results in increasing pain. Look at that last verse again. In much wisdom there is much grief, and increasing knowledge results in increasing pain. And I want you to think about that for a minute. He is saying the wiser he has become, the more he feels the pain. Now think about this. We're talking about Solomon the wise. Hold your hand there and turn back to 1 Kings chapter 3. 1 Kings chapter 3. This is a good reminder for us. I'm going to read verse 5 through verse 13. In Gibeon, the Lord appeared to Solomon in a dream at night, and God said, "Ask what you wish me to give you." Then Solomon said, "You have shown great loving kindness to your servant David, my father, according as he walked before you in truth and righteousness and uprightness of heart toward you. And you have reserved for him this great loving kindness, that you have given him a son to sit on the throne, as it is this day. Now, O Lord my God, you have made your servant king in place of my father David, yet I am but a little child, and I do not know how to go out or to come in. Your servant is in the midst of a people which you have chosen, a great people, who are too many to be numbered or counted. So give your servant an understanding heart to judge, your people to discern between good and evil. For who is able to judge this great people of yours? Verse 10, it was pleasing in the sight of the Lord that Solomon had asked this thing. God said to him, because you have asked this thing, and you have not asked for yourself long life, or not asked riches for yourself, nor have you asked for the life of your enemies, but have asked for yourself discernment to understand justice. Behold, I have done according to your words. Behold, I have given you a wise and discerning heart, so that there is no one like you before you, nor shall there be one like you to arise after you. I have also given you what you have not asked for, both riches and honor, so that there will not be any among the kings like you all your days. Turn back to Ecclesiastes chapter 1. I want you to think about this. Surely, if you were thinking clear-headed, like Solomon was, and you were determined to find purpose in life, pursuing philosophy has got to be the place to start. And if there's one thing that would separate you from the rest of the world, surely the gift of wisdom would be the best thing to ask for. It would be the key that would unlock the understanding of everything. Wisdom would be the key to happiness. Many believe that is true. This has been the understanding since the Enlightenment. If you think about it, there are plenty of philosophers out there, plenty of politicians that will all argue that the key to the world's problems is education. Surely if you had a good education, if your populace was understanding, you would not have crime, you would not have poverty, you would not have immorality. It's all because of lack of education. Now that sounds reasonable. I've been to countries where they really camp on that. America has become the mantra for get people educated and they will behave rightly. They will find joy and purpose. And yet, think of all the miserable, brilliant people you know. Think about how high the suicide rate is in America, one of the highest educated countries in the world. Think about the amount of information that is available at our fingertips. Hey, Google, and all your phones turn on. And yet, Solomon, who is, by the way, at the top of the intellectual food chain, is miserable. And he realizes at a greater level, watch this, at a greater level, the pain, the futility of life. And there's nothing he can do about it. Think about how our intellectualism, and I am not anti-academia, not anti-education at all, but I would venture to say our intellectualism has not made us more joyful. It has not given us a greater purpose. It is the intellectual elites that argue that we come from monkeys. Really? That doesn't bring a lot of purpose in life. Let's look at what else he pursues. Hedonism. Ecclesiastes chapter 2, verse 1. So I said to myself, come now, and I will test you with pleasure. So enjoy yourself. And behold, it too was futility. I said of laughter, it is madness, and of pleasure, what does it accomplish? I explored with my mind how to stimulate my body with wine, while my mind was guiding me wisely, and how to take hold of folly until I could see what good there was for the sons of men to do under heaven for the few years of their lives. I just wrote in my notes here, wow. Solomon takes his wisdom and combines it with a 1960s pleasure sexperiment. Getting wasted and journaling. You've seen people do this, right? You know, this, somehow if I add integrity to my debauchery, it makes it okay. Well, I'm writing a book, so therefore my immorality is okay. Well, that's absurd. But let's say it's not absurd. How's this going to work for Solomon? I mean, if anyone has the best chance to find joy in pleasure, I think it would be Solomon. 700 concubines, 300 wives, 365 days in a year. You do the math. It didn't make him happy, did it? What about stimulating his body with substances? Clearly, he got drunk on a regular basis. He owned the best vineyards. The Philistines had taught the Israelites how to make beer. We've seen how our society has gone off the deep end with the illicit use of drugs. Does it work? Of course not. They're all numbing agents. And so he pursues materialism. He says, well, if those drugs of pleasure didn't work, what about the drug of materialism? Verse 4, chapter 2, I enlarged my works. I built houses for myself. I planted vineyards for myself. I made gardens and parks for myself. And I planted them with all kinds of fruit trees. I made ponds of water for myself from which to irrigate a forest of growing trees. I bought male and female slaves, and I had homeborn slaves. Also, I possessed flocks and herds larger than any who preceded me in Jerusalem. Also, I collected for myself silver and gold and the treasure of kings and provinces. I provided for myself male and female singers and the pleasures of men, many concubines. Then I became great and increased more than all who preceded me in Jerusalem. My wisdom also stood by me. All that my eyes desired, I did not refuse them. I did not withhold my heart from any pleasure, for my heart was pleased because of all of my labor, and this was my reward for all my labor. Haven't we done this? If I could only get, fill in the blank. If I could only get that first house, then me and my wife would be so happy. I would never want for anything again, Lord. You know that's true. And then just a few years later, maybe we could get into that neighborhood over there with the better schools. Maybe we could get the pool. Or remember that car you just had to have? If I could have this car, it would make me so happy. Did you feel that way when a few years later you limped it to the dealer and hoped that it would run so you might get a $500 trade-in? Let me put this into perspective. Christmas is just a few days away, and I'm going to look out here, the next week or two, and I'm going to see new sweaters and new watches and certainly some new purses. Can I get an amen out of you ladies? And everyone's going to have smiles on their faces, and you and I are going to make a deal. This time next year, I'm going to ask you, where's your stuff? And if you can find it, and if it's not in the Goodwill pile, I'm going to ask you, how long did it make you happy? I mean, let's be honest. Most of the stuff is broken by Christmas afternoon. Now think about it in Solomon's terms. That's our level. What about Solomon's terms? Oh my goodness. He enlarged Israel to the size it had never been before. He was the richest man who had ever lived. It was said that silver was just as common as stones in Jerusalem. He spent 7 years building a magnificent temple, 14 years building his own palace. He made trade agreements, formed alliances, opened a port on the Gulf of Aqaba. He bought the best of the best, imported Egyptian horses, chariots. He brought wood in from Lebanon, fine inlaid, gold trim. He had more gold trim than Donald Trump's 787. He had the best of the best. Richard Bronson, he was blue collar compared to Solomon. His Christmas day, quote unquote, was the best of the best. And yet, did it give him purpose? What does Christ say in Mark 8:36? For what does it profit a man to gain the whole world and forfeit his soul? For what will a man give in exchange for his soul? We know that verse. Do we know what precedes it? Mark 8:34. If anyone wishes to come after me, he must deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. For whoever wishes to save his life will lose it. But whoever loses his life for my sake and the gospel's will save it. And so what is the end result of this pursuit of materialism? Verse 11. Behold, all was, there's that word again, vanity, and striving after the wind. It made no difference that he tried to, infuse his pursuit of materialism with wisdom. That didn't make it any more noble. The fact is that though he actually amassed wealth, was he any different than the bum that won the lottery and blew it all in 1 year? Because at the end of the day, they can't take it with them. And it didn't really change his life. How much more for us? I would say this is what might get a lot of us. If I could just make, throw out a big number, if I could just make $250,000, I would be happy. Really? Verse 16, there will be no lasting remembrance of the wise man as with the fool, insomuch as in the coming days all will be forgotten. And how will the wise man and the fool alike die? It's a waste of time. So verse 17, he says, I hated life. Nothing was making me happy. I hated it. And it was all futility and trying to, what's the phrase there? Catch the wind. Catch the wind. So far, which pursuit did you think would bring you joy? Now think about that image of trying to catch it. You have to realize it. Even if you could catch it, it disappears. You ever tried to catch the wind? I literally remember that as a kiddo, trying to catch the wind. We'd talk to each other. Okay, I'm going to try to catch the wind. So where does it end? What are you saying? I'm saying Bill Gates is miserable. Bill Gates is miserable. The money didn't make him happy, and giving it all away won't do the trick. Nothing we can do or amass or make or get will complete us. If I could only have that, if I only get into this school, ladies, if I could only marry this guy, guys, if I could only find that girl. It's striving after wind. Pursuit of legacy, number 4. Verse 12, so I turned to consider wisdom, madness, and folly. For what will the man do who comes after me, after the king, what will the man do who will come after the king except what has already been done? It helps to look at Solomon's resume on this one. He left behind monuments, history, anthology, and frankly, no one cared. In the corporate world, there's a parallel. You ever heard this saying? They will remember you for a day and forget you for a lifetime. 30 years at a company, 40 years at a company. You get your little birthday cake, you get your little send-off. A few years ago, I even went to the head of the FBI in Dallas. Used to go to church here. Massive retirement party. You have to retire at 57 in the FBI. This guy had done a lot of great work. Huge, expensive, nice party, retirement party. Next day, someone took over his post. There was nothing left. I mean, he had a picture somewhere, but I really kind of felt bad. I thought, that's it? That's it. I studied business economics in school, and I remember one of the guys that we studied who was at the top of the heap. He had the brass ring. President, CEO, American Airlines. Remember his name? Anyone? No. And I'm not that old. Robert Crandall. All the case studies in school, in business economics, in finance, in trade, in corporate management, all of them were about Robert Crandall. He was the guy to look to. No one knows his name now. No one knows his name. All right, if you're over 50, you cannot raise your hand on this one. You youngins. Who is Ryan O'Neal? Anyone? Raise your hand if you know Ryan O'Neal. Very famous actor. Not too long ago, he died last week. No one knows about him anymore. No one knows about him. Wasn't he big at one time? You guys remember? Oh my goodness, he was it. Now we don't even know his name. Verse 14, the wise man's eyes are in his head, but the fool walks in darkness. And yet I know that one fate befalls them both. Then I said to myself, as is the fate of the fool, it will also befall me. Why then have I been extremely wise? So I said to myself, this too is vanity. And so often what happens, especially with unbelievers, is that guys grow up. They put away the sex, the drugs, the rock and roll. They get a job, they get married, and they trade one drug, one pursuit for another. The drugs of pleasure, materialism, drinking too much, whatever else, and they traded for, number 5, the pursuit of labor. I'm going to build a career. Verse 18, thus I hated all the fruit of my labor for which I had labored under the sun, for I must leave it to the man who will come after me. And who knows whether he will be a wise man or a fool? Yet he will have control over the fruit of all my labor for which I have labored by acting wisely under the sun. This too is vanity. Let me tell you a little bit about Solomon's labor, Solomon's work. You ready? It doesn't make a difference. His son Rehoboam whittled it all away. There's no point in even telling you. Verse 20, therefore I completely despaired of all of the fruit of my labor, which I had labored under the sun. Where then is a man who has labored with wisdom, knowledge, and skill? Then he gives his legacy to one who has not labored with them. This too is vanity and a great evil. If wisdom doesn't fulfill, then adding wealth and pleasure and materialism and work doesn't change anything. And so you might just say, why don't we just cut this rat race short? Why don't we just quit? Solomon says, I'm glad you asked. Let me tell you the purpose of living. Number 6. Now remember Solomon's caveat. What was it? Life is meaningless where? Under the sun. Now hang with me on this. Ready? Put your thinking caps on. But what about above the sun? So far, everything has been described in relation to a finite man in a finite universe, and there is no reason, no purpose, no joy in living above the earth and under the sun. But, what if there was something bigger above the sun? What if there was something that outlasted the machine, the cosmos? What if there was something that didn't chew you up? In fact, if there is something above the sun that is bigger, what if this something chose to reveal himself to the man in the machine? In fact, what if he became man in the machine? What if there was a God who chose to not only reveal himself, but become part of his creation and lift him out of this meaningless mire and even provide a way where he would outlast the present creation and cosmos and exist with God forever? That'd be a pretty good deal. Galatians 4:4. But when the fullness of time came, God sent forth his Son, born of a woman, born under the law, so that he, above the sun, might redeem those who were under the law, that we might receive adoption as sons and live with God forever. Amen? Whew. If that was true, that God, there is a God, and he is above the sun, and he reveals himself by becoming man, well, that would change everything. And God did become man and literally tabernacled among us. This would change things, wouldn't it? Think about it. Things would no longer be the pursuit of meaning and satisfaction, but rather things would become the appetizer to the meal of God's goodness. Can you go with this picture a little bit? This is why things are not good or bad, but it's when they become an idol. When creation becomes an idol of our heart, that's when it becomes bad. But when creation is simply enjoyed, much like the side dishes on a plate, well then it's the main thing that stays the main thing. Look at verse 24. Listen to his conclusion and tell me this doesn't make sense. There is nothing better for a man than to eat and drink and tell himself that his labor is good. This also I have seen is from the hand of God. For who can eat and who can have enjoyment without him? Chief end of man, to glorify God and enjoy him forever. But see, there's another caveat. Look at verse 26. For to a person who is good in his sight, he has given wisdom and knowledge and joy. While to the sinner, the unbeliever, he has given the task of gathering and collecting so that he may give to the one who is good in God's sight. This too is vanity and striving after wind. Chief end of man is to glorify God and enjoy him forever. The only people who can enjoy God are those who glorify him. God's got it rigged. The only people who can enjoy God are those who glorify him. Put in simple terms, the only people who can enjoy what God has given them are those who have repented and believed in the Son. They've placed their faith in the person and work of Jesus Christ. Simply put, those who want to enjoy life must first enjoy God. And if you don't enjoy God, you will not enjoy life. Then the only people who enjoy God are believers. Well, that's a paradigm shift. So what does it mean to have joy in purpose then? If all these 5 things don't satisfy, then what does it mean to have joy in our purpose? Well, if you want to have joy in purpose, you have to enjoy the Creator. And when you enjoy the Creator, guess what? Then you really enjoy creation for all the right reasons and in all the right priorities. I think we understand what it means to enjoy the Creator. What does it mean? Well, think about it. Coming to Christ is it's an allegiance shift from worshiping self to bowing the knee to Christ. That's enjoying him. That's saying, I'm no longer going to try on my own. I'm no longer going to keep this idol factory going of trying to make myself happy. I'm going to bow the knee to Christ and trust him with my life. Once I do that, I can then enjoy his creation. I can then enjoy a glass of wine without using it as a numbing agent, right? I can then enjoy a plentiful meal without it being gluttonous. I can then take the fruits of my labor after I have given to Him and pay my obligations and buy what I want. That's the Reformed understanding of it, the Reformed doctrine. Enjoy it. Have you paid your due? Have you given to God? Have you paid your dues? Buy what you want. Now all of a sudden you're saying, oh, so you're not saying that we have to be Amish? Of course not. Enjoy a nice car if you can afford it, but don't let it be your idol. It's a box of sheet metal with rubber tires, but enjoy it. You want the bigger house? Great. Have you given? Are you doing it in such a manner that you're going to use it for the glory of God? Well, then buy a bigger house. You want the red dress or the blue dress? Well, have you given to God and paid your dues? What do you want? Pick it. Again, this is why things are not good or bad, but it's our heart attitude towards glorifying God or glorifying self. And if we glorify God, then we get to enjoy His creation. Ask yourself this the next time you want something. Am I pursuing this because I believe that it will bring me joy? Or am I already experiencing joy and I can take or leave this thing in much the same way I can take a side dish as a nice compliment to a great steak? Oh, it might be good, but if it wasn't there, I really wouldn't miss it. It's the steak that matters. Well, the steak is God. You know, the side dish, well, that's just His creation. It's a nice compliment. Let me leave us with this. Christians are the most joyful people on this earth, period. They have been the most joyful people throughout history, period. But here's another fact. They've also been the poorest of people. Generally, we are at the bottom of the economic strata. Throughout history, this is the anomaly where we live in now. Christians are poor, and yet they still have joy, because joy in the journey, joy in our purpose is found in Jesus Christ and not in things. So you heard me a while back read that poem for my friend. What is man that thou art mindful of him? That depressing poem. Well, he didn't come up with that title on his own. In fact, if you know your Psalms, you know that's from Psalm 8. Kind of ripped that off of David. David has some of the same words, but a much different perspective. Let me leave you with this. Psalm 8, starting in verse 4. What is man that thou art mindful of him, and the son of man that thou visitest him? For thou hast made him a little lower than the angels, and thou hast crowned him with glory and honor. Thou madest him to have dominion over the works of thy hands. Thou hast put all things under his feet, all sheep and oxen, yea, and the beasts of the field, the fowl of the air, and the fish of the sea, and whatsoever passeth through the paths of the seas. O Lord our God, how excellent is thy name in all the earth. That's got a little different tenor on it, doesn't it? That sounds a little more joyful. That gives us a little better perspective. God is above all, in control of all, has given us creation to be the imago Dei, the image of God, and to have dominion and rule, not to have things rule our heart. Where is joy found? In Him, and in enjoying what He's given us.